On the phone, it is always a pleasure to welcome back to this program the Uber blogger at the Uber blog, Hullabaloo, or digby'sblog.blogspot.com. Is it still a blogspot?
It is. It is. I'm old school.
I understand. I love it. I still love the old blog spots.
I know there aren't very many of us left, but still carrying the torch for the old days.
Indeed, in many ways. So Digby, particularly last week, there were a lot of stories out that the Democrats heading to this so-called fiscal cliff, which I think is just another way, of course, to scare us. It's going to be problematic, but not necessarily in the way that many of the solutions are floated would have you believe. The Democrats, at least in terms of the sunsetting of the Bush tax cuts, seem huge asterisk. Seem to have a new strategy that different from the one that they had at least as early or as late as early June. It seems like they're going to allow these to essentially sunset, assuming that the vote tomorrow to get rid of them and just put in a middle-class tax cut fails, which I think we believe. Give me your sense of this, and how real do you think it is, and how smart do you think it is?
Well, I've thought they should have done this from the beginning. In fact, one of my main complaints about the strategy of the Democrats and the Obama administration on these tax cuts goes back to the beginning of the Obama administration, in which I felt like they should have extended the middle-class tax cuts as part of the stimulus and just basically gotten that out of the way. Once that was done and you had those in place, extended permanently, then you were only dealing with the tax cuts for the rich going forward, which is a much easier lift for the Democrats. I've never understood why they didn't get that done when they had the majority in the Congress. But in any case, that didn't happen. So now it seems that, they're thinking that what they'll do is let the tax cuts expire on schedule at the first of the year and then come immediately back in with the Obama tax cuts for the middle class, which makes good sense to me. I mean, I have no problem with the idea of forcing the Republicans to vote against tax cuts for the middle class. I think that's a beautiful, tactic to use, and I suspect that the Republicans will not actually, obstruct that. That seems even a bridge too far for them. Could be wrong. And if that's the case, then we have a battle royale over tax cuts for the middle class and the Republicans not wanting to give it to them. And that's a reasonable place for us to begin a new conversation about what's really going on in Washington. I don't know how serious the Democrats are. This could be some kind of negotiating position. It's a risky thing to do. The Republicans have shown that they will take things to the very limit, go beyond any reasonable place in negotiations. We saw what they did with the debt ceiling, and they've proven that they are hardcore negotiators. But I think that it's the smart move for the Democrats, because otherwise we're in a situation where we've got this troop of centrist and conservative outsiders and insiders who are converging on this idea of enacting Simpson-Bowles, which that's far, far worse than allowing the tax cuts to expire and then dealing with the consequences of that.
Yeah, I mean, there just seems to be an enormous amount, and this is the stuff that basically you just, you get these small pieces on Politico or these, because they're all, it's all happening in the Beltway. Every now and then you see some type of op-ed, David Brooksian op-ed talking about some new version of new labels, third way, Americans elect, essentially,
fix the debt.
You fix the debt. I mean, it just goes on and on. They all seem to be the same people. They're constantly funded. Many of them funded by Pete Peterson. Tell us who Pete Peterson is, and let me just full disclosure. In the last day that I was on Dylan Radigan's program before it went off the air, I didn't have a tie, and I'd meant to bring one just to show my respects because I'm no longer wearing ties on TV until maybe in the event someone pays me, I'll do it. But and so I didn't have a tie. A nice, very well-dressed gentleman came in. He was apparently a guest on the show. I didn't know who he was. And he heard me complaining, but he said, I have an extra tie. He gave me the tie. I wore it. I didn't realize who he was until Radigan was interviewing him. And, also sort of indicative of this sort of this strange sort of political sphere that Radigan inhabited. It turned out to be David Walker.
Oh, my God.
And so I realized I was wearing Pete Peterson's tie for all intents and purposes.
Oh, my God. I hope you can live with yourself.
It was difficult. It felt it tightening itself around my neck.
I imagine.
Almost automatically as I made it to the room. But tell us who David Walker is, but more importantly, Pete Peterson and his sort of ongoing agenda to cut our Social Security.
Well, Pete Peterson is a major hedge fund manager, master of the universe, who has been around for decades. He was in the Nixon administration. He made billions, literally, in the markets, and he has devoted a good portion of his life and now a big chunk of his fortune to ending Social Security and Medicare. Now, he does this under the auspices of, fixing the deficit for the grandkids and what have you. But, he has been quoted over the years saying things like, we can't afford to have, people spend the last part of their lives on a paid government vacation. So I think we understand where he's coming from. Moreover, and this is what I think is the greatest evidence for what his real agenda is, when the government went into surplus under the Clinton administration, Pete Peterson disappeared. He never said a word about shoring up any of the, programs or doing anything like that. He didn't come out for Clinton and Gore's plan to save Social Security first or any of that stuff. He was, right there taking his tax cuts and spending all the money. So anybody who was a deficit hawk who did that, I think, gave the game away. He was there only when there's deficit and only then, talking about major cuts to the safety net programs that, every American benefits from.
To be fair, I think he's on record back in '96 saying that Social Security was in full-on crisis and we need to cut it to save it. I mean,
he's been saying that since the 70s. I mean, Ronald Reagan said it in the 60s that, it was going to be broke by the time the man who was then 21 years old was getting ready to retire. I mean, they've never changed their tune about that. And in fairness, I think we have to also say it's not just Republicans or, Wall Street sharks. Plenty of Democrats have done the same thing. Bob Kerrey, who's running in Iowa now or is it Iowa?
Nebraska.
Nebraska, sorry. He's running for the Senate for Ben Nelson's old seat. In 1999, he said it was clear that by 2012, the entire government would be broke from paying for Social Security. He's been, I mean, I guess so. Time is ticking away, but by the election, maybe he'll be proven right. These people have been saying this forever. And, it's never true because it doesn't even make sense. It's theoretically impossible for the government to actually, quote, go broke. It's the entity that prints the money. But nonetheless, this has been going on forever. And these guys just basically have a philosophical, hostility to these safety net programs. So Pete Peterson, having made these billions, and is extremely, unbelievably wealthy, has devoted his life to that. In his retirement, more or less, he has created the Peterson Institute, which is devoted to this cause, and he put $1 billion behind it, and that's a lot of money, even by D.C. standards. So he's paying half of Washington at this point. Half of the political establishment is on his payroll to one extent or another, and they're all working in various ways. Now, he's got centrist think tanks like New America Foundation, which I don't think anybody considers to be some kind of a doctrinaire conservative, think tank. It's supposedly nonpartisan, but they're working night and day on this project. The Center for Responsible Budget, which is run by a woman named Maya McGinnis, she's been on this since the 90s, and she's the one who's behind this latest. They come up with a new slogan every few months. This latest one is Fix the Debt, which now they're bringing in CEOs, which I don't know what the problem is with people in Washington who think that this is the moment to bring in the titans of business in Wall Street to lead us. But
who is? I mean, I saw this piece. I mean, who is calling these people together? We're talking about the CEO and chairman of Honeywell, the executive chairman of the Eaton Corporation, the Tenneco, Invesco. I mean, this sounds sort of like almost like a parody. Aetna, R.R. Donnelly. I mean, it's Jamie Dimon is coming in. That's very nice to see that he's coming to our rescue now. But who is assembling these people? And this is the interesting thing. This is why I want to talk about this now with you, because here we have a time where virtually nothing can get through Congress, right? I mean, nothing. Nobody, there's not, even the policy wonks are basically, this is when they're taking their vacations because they know nothing is going to get through this Congress. Yet, you've got these CEOs who are ostensibly, incredibly busy, and because, you've got to work hard for your $100, $200, $300, $400,000 a day that you get paid. Coming into Washington to fix a problem that supposedly will not get anybody addressed. They're all hoping that they all see this lame duck period as sort of the golden chalice, don't they? Like this is the height of our power because it is the minimal amount of accountability.
Yep. And yeah, that's absolutely what it is. Now, just to go back to your previous question, I don't know who is gathering these people together, but according to Stephen Pearlstein in the Washington Post, it's Maya McGinnis at the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, who he says was, quote, nudging it along and pulling it all together. So, whatever that means, I don't know that anybody has that power. But I think that in general, what you're saying is absolutely true. They see this as a moment, and they've actually. And I think it was an accident, but it's wound up, in their view, being a very propitious lame duck in ways that make you shudder when you think about it. That's what this fiscal cliff is all about. You have several elements that are coming together just before and after the election. One is the continuing resolution, which is the ability to keep funding the government. That's what the government shutdown arguments are always about. They don't really have a budget. They haven't agreed on anything, but what normally happens in the government is that they pass this continuing resolution, which allows the government to keep funding while they're arguing over it. Normally, this happens in October of every year, at the end of October. In an election year, it would be pro forma. You wouldn't even think about having this argument while everybody's out campaigning. There is some question as to whether or not that's going to happen this year. That's number one.
There's two elements about this that we should note. One is the series of continuing resolutions are horrible for the effectiveness of government. Because it makes it impossible for any agencies to do any type of long-range planning because they have no idea what their budget's going to be. So if they just have this sort of like, okay, keep operating at the same budget for the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, without any capacity to know whether or not they're going to be functioning or being able to start programs or whether they should wrap up programs. And the other element is that this has the potential of being very sticky for Republicans this year, because like you say, this usually is pro forma. But are we going to be? I've seen this story in Roll Call by Stan Collender, where he talks about this could be a problem because the Tea Party may revolt, and I don't know why we call it Tea Party. We just call it most of the Republicans at this point may revolt. and force a shutdown, and Boehner's supposedly afraid of it. Do you think this is the case, or is this more just sort of Boehner saying, like, I'm just in charge of these crazy lunatics, you need me? I'm the only thing standing between us and Armageddon.
It's never clear. And, I would have said always that, of course, this is nonsense and that he's playing a game here. He's negotiating. But, you have to admit, after the debt ceiling last year, it did end up, I think Boehner really did want to make the grand bargain, and they wouldn't let him. So it's hard to know. On the other hand, one of the things that Collender said in his article that I thought was quite fascinating is that Boehner and these guys, the right wing of the House Republicans, are trying to put some, they're trying to decouple the continuing resolution from the sequester, which is, I'll explain that in a minute, but that's the defense cuts, and they're talking about taking the defense cuts off the table in order to pass this continuing resolution, which the Democrats are balking at and saying, no way, we're not going to do that. So it could be the Democrats, if the Republicans put a bunch of conditions on this continuing resolution that they find, unacceptable, that the Democrats could be the ones to balk. Now, keep in mind that this is all happening right as the election is happening. So we will have to see whether or not any of this comes to pass. If I had to make a bet, I would say it won't. I think that this is one aspect of the fiscal cliff that I think will probably make it beyond the election. Now, what happens then? They could pass one, a month's continuing resolution, come back in the lame duck and do God knows what. But as far as it happening before the election, that strikes me as a long shot. There's also the debt ceiling, which is, that was one that in the last agreement that they had was a short-term deal, as you recall, and that's going to come up again. And we already know that Boehner and his caucus are saying they absolutely will not raise, blah, 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 raise the debt ceiling without cutting, half the government. So there's that. Then at the beginning of the year, you have the Bush tax cuts expiring, and we already talked about the possibilities there. Then you have these budget triggers. That's the sequester.
And this is a function of the last debt ceiling vote. This is
exactly
where they were going to have a super committee, and they were going to get together, and they were going to figure out how they were going to cut everything. And if they achieved 1.2, I think it was, trillion dollars worth of cuts, it would stop the automatic triggers. They didn't. So now we're left with these automatic triggers. What is the amounts and the types of spending that will be cut automatically, supposedly in 2013? I guess just right around the time of the inauguration or re-inauguration, depending on who wins. There's basically two different sort of elements to this, and broadly speaking.
There's $1.2 trillion in cuts. I mean, that's a lot of money, and half of it is defense, and half of it is domestic programs, excluding Social Security and Medicare. So, I don't know, they'll end up ending the FAA and the FDA and, all veterans programs or something. It's very, very steep cuts and completely unacceptable. I don't think anybody ever expected that was going to happen. Let me just say one thing about this. This is all, they created this sequester. They created this budget trigger, and they can uncreate it at any time they want. This was not written, didn't come down from Mount Sinai. It's not an amendment to the Constitution. It is an agreement that they made amongst themselves, and they can agree not to honor it. And that is exactly what is going to happen. This idea that this is all written in stone, that these things are all happening, and it's a horrible catastrophe, and we're all going to go over this cliff if we don't do something, i.e., cut Social Security and Medicare, then the whole world is going to come crashing down, is nonsense. These are all agreements that these people made among themselves to do things at a particular time, and there's no reason that it has to actually happen that way. So, they are creating a sense of crisis in order to come back into this lame duck session and to do the greatest amount of damage that they can. I reject the whole premise. of the fiscal cliff. And I think that, we're all being suckered into this, and we're distracted, with it. Obviously, we've got a major election going on. There's a lot of activity happening in the world. There, the economy is still in a slump. There's lots of things to think about. But this particular thing is happening within the Beltway amongst the Beltway elites and the political establishment who are ginning up this crisis, which nobody understands. I mean, just us talking about it, we've probably confused people more than they were before. And at the end of the day, they're going to use this as an excuse to do a whole bunch of things. This is a very bad situation. And, my personal feeling is that we are better off, kind of having a standoff and ending up with gridlock in which they have to continue this, go ahead and lay it off on another few months. Just, wait till after the inauguration. I mean, obviously they have to deal with these tax cuts because that's an automatic, that is for real. I mean, that's in the statute. It expires. I don't have a problem with that. If the Democrats are setting this up to have everything go into gridlock except and including the Bush tax cuts, and they come back on January 1st and say, okay, we're introducing new tax cuts for the middle class, that's probably the best scenario.
Right.
Because I do not trust any of these people. You've got CEOs, you've got Jamie Dimon, you've got Pete Peterson, you've got all the think tanks arrayed, all of whom have been making the case for decades now that Social Security has to be cut. And let me just make one point clear. In this Social Security cut, what they're probably going to do is reduce the cost of living in a way that sounds very benign. It's not benign. It's going to end up costing, down the road, 90-year-old, mostly women, 10% of their meager income when they're 90 years old. That is a huge, huge sacrifice on their part. Meanwhile, what they're going to ask in return, if they follow this Simpson-Bowles formula, which seems to be the agreed-upon, very serious people formula, they're going to slash income tax rates, which makes absolutely no sense, in return for closing loopholes and doing some other sort of things around the edges, which will not raise any revenue because we all know it's a Full Employment Act for tax lawyers and lobbyists. And the only people making sacrifices will be these very elderly people down the road. I'll be one of them. You probably will be too. And the billionaires, it's tip money for them at most, and probably not even that. This is no bargain. It's no bargain for the American people if they do this. There's no reason to do it, and the idea that the Democrats are even, considering this whole idea of a balanced approach, and we have to, have a grand bargain, and everybody's got skin in the game and all that. No, that it's not necessary. We don't have to do it. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's all kind of happening. It seems like it's a runaway train at the moment. So, again, best-case scenario is the Tea Party and the Democrats go to loggerheads and nothing happens at all.
And just so that people know, when you hear the innocuous way that they talk about cutting the cost of living increases will be to chain it to the CPI. Those are the watchwords. When you hear someone saying, we're going to just chain this to the CPI, what they're saying is we're going to cut your benefits. And also, obviously, the same thing with the idea of raising the retirement age. If you add up chaining the CPI and raising the retirement age, you're actually talking about money that will be larger than the cuts. You're actually talking about larger cuts down the road than would be if we did nothing. So we're talking about cuts up to 30% with those different features combined to avoid cuts of 22 to 24% starting in 2031. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. The other thing that seems to, and you touched on this, is this notion of their agreement for these automatic cuts. This is the functional equivalent of me saying on a Friday, I'm going on a diet Monday, come hell or high water. And then Monday comes and I'm just like, I actually think it's probably better for me to start midweek. But
I'm not feeling well today, so I don't think I'll be, I won't do it.
And the game that's being played here, as far as I can tell, and we already had, I think, Dick Cheney visited Congress last week to come in and tell people, tell his congressman, like, if you cut $50 billion from the defense budget over the next 10, $50 billion a year for the next 10 years. This is going to leave us. You think we're infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood now? Wait till you see what happens. With these cuts.
Right. Next thing you know, the terrorists will be here opening fire in movie theaters or something.
Indeed, exactly. And the other half of that, of these $500 billion worth of cuts in discretionary spending, which would essentially, the cuts that we're talking about to defense relative to the same amount of cuts to discretionary spending, it's off the charts in terms of the size and the implications of those cuts to discretionary spending. Is the game that the Democrats are playing right now, and I'm giving them, I am projecting upon them the best of intentions, which obviously is a very hairy prospect. But the game that they're playing is that we're going to hold you to the defense cuts because we know that you will not allow for those, and therefore will protect the discretionary cuts from happening as well. I mean, the worst case scenario, of course, is if somehow they manage to not have the cuts on defense, if they were decoupled those two sets of cuts, and we were just left with the discretionary cuts. I mean, give me your sense of how that could play out, and if you've seen any reporting or any conversations you've had specifically on that notion.
Well, I think that's the strategy. I mean, I think that it was set up to be that, that you couldn't. You either had to go all the way or the whole thing would fall apart because everybody knew. I mean, I don't think anybody doubts that that the Democrats would probably, in the end, allow the discretionary cuts to happen at some level. I mean, they've proven over and over again that they're the ones who are willing. They want to be the grown-ups in the room and whatever else. So they'll agree to that. But nobody, I don't think, ever believed that the Republicans would go along with defense cuts. And keep in mind also that we had Leon Panetta come up there and say no defense cuts. So it's not like it's not a bipartisan agreement on that. So, I think that that's what that whole thing was designed to do, which was, that they were going to offset one another, and therefore it wouldn't happen. Now, they thought that this was going to happen in the super committee. I don't know if they ever did, to be honest with you. I mean, I think they thought it might work, but they kind of knew that it probably wouldn't. It shoved everything down the road. Now they want it, now it's after the election, and they'll come back and take a fresh look. But those defense cuts are not going to happen, Sam. They're just, It's impossible to imagine it. No, what they want to do is use all this pressure from the fiscal cliff, I think, to push Simpson Bowles or, whatever the new branding of Simpson Bowles is. And that does not include substantial cuts to defense. That is not what that is about. I mean, basically what Simpson Bowles, what they really want to accomplish with all this is to, cut the safety net programs, cut income tax rates. Now, keep in mind here that one of the most perverse aspects of this whole thing is that they actually want to cut taxes. They want to cut the rates. But what they're saying they're going to do is they're going to close the loopholes and cut, quote, tax expenditures, which are tax incentives, essentially, that are built into the system. And they're going to cut all of those. Well, good luck with that. Because what we see, you've been watching what's happened with Dodd-Frank, right?
Sure.
I mean, this was, they have been in there with an army of lobbyists to water that thing down to the point where it's almost, it's nearly non-existent. That is what will happen.
We've seen this before.
Tax.
I mean, we've seen this before under Reagan, and I don't want to be in a position of quoting Gopher to bolster my point, but I was on Larry Kudlow's show with Fred Grandy, former Congressman Fred Gopher Grandy, and he was on the Hill at that time as a congressman, and he was the one on this show who made the point that the whole idea of that 1986, I think it was, omnibus tax cut that Reagan pushed through was that, well, we're cutting rates, but we're closing the loopholes. And within 3 or 4 years, every single one of those loopholes was back in a piecemeal fashion, because that's a very easy thing to do. It's always easy to create those loopholes because most people don't even understand them. They're done in a very sort of a benign, dry way. And ostensibly, they're for middle-class people. I mean, take the home mortgage deduction. This is ostensibly something that will puts people into houses, in a cheaper way. But the benefits accrue, of course, more so if you buy a $2 or $3 or $4 or $15 million home in those instances, and they end up jacking up the price of houses anyways. So it's just one of those sort of tax expenditures that is an easy sell and impossible to get rid of. And so that's the plan. When you hear get rid of loopholes, basically it's just a way of saying this will get rid of loopholes for anywhere from 6 to 18 months, and then they'll be back.
Exactly. And at the same time, they are inexplicably lowering tax rates. And they're saying this is, I don't understand why nobody questions this. I mean, it just seems to, we've got to fix the deficit. Our grandkids are going to be drowning in debt. The world's coming to an end. We've got a cliff, Armageddon, whatever. And they're lowering tax rates. I mean, how does this make sense? I mean, why aren't they at the least keeping the tax rates and closing the loopholes? Where's the need to lower them? Now, there's a whole, school of thought around, what is it, broaden the base and lower the rates, all this thing. It doesn't make any sense. In fact, it reminds me so much of the whole supply side magical thinking.
That's what it
where,
is.
Gee, if we just lower tax rates, we'll bring in so much more money. And for them to get away with it a second time is just unbelievable. And yet here we are again. And everyone's, I hear everybody from Andrea Mitchell to, Dianne Feinstein to any number of other people just repeating that like it makes sense. We need to lower the rates in order to close the deficit. What, huh?
What happens is when you lower people's tax rates, they have more money to spend on unicorn food, and everyone knows it's the unicorns running faster, which create more economic activity and thereby generate more revenue.
Of course. I keep forgetting about the unicorns. And the magic ponies.
So this is all part of that. So we're going to, as we enter into this, I mean, the one thing that actually sort of gives me some hope is, well, there's two things. One is that even though we have this lame duck session from November to theoretically, I guess, more or less Christmas time, it's a very short period of time for these people to get their act together, which is why these CEOs and these no labels are all trying to tee up stuff to make it really easy at that point. The other thing is that if Mitt Romney loses the election, I mean, if Mitt Romney wins the election, I mean,
forget it. Yeah, we're dead.
None of this, all of these conversations are moot. Go directly to. Do not pass. Go directly to the worst case scenario on all of these things, because it would also indicate a Republicans taking control of both houses, which is probably more than likely, even if President Obama is reelected. But if Mitt Romney loses, the reaction by the Republicans, of course, is going to be he was not conservative enough.
Yes.
And this could actually save us on almost all of these accords, it seems to me, because it's going to mean a hardening of the Republicans rather than a softening as I guess President Obama thinks, and the sort of the conventional wisdom, which I don't know if they even believe it, but that's what they say. People don't realize that if Mitt Romney loses, that means the Republican Party moves even more to the right and becomes even more extreme because they are in their oppositional posture.
Oh, absolutely. This was, this is one of the, the odd effects of them nominating a so-called moderate, which, by the way, he, I don't think he's anything, actually. I think he is, whatever they tell him to be at this point. But yes, of course, they will see him as the ultimate betrayer of the conservative cause. I mean, they see everybody that way. They treat George Bush that way, and that guy was a real conservative. And I see a hardening as well. It's almost too bad. I had kind of wished it would be good for America if they had nominated a true hardcore conservative and the person, a Goldwater type scenario, and the person lost, absolutely without question. They would have to actually start reevaluating what they're doing. But they're not going to do that this time. They will definitely, I think, harden their position. And in a way, because the Democrats are so willing to go along with this conventional wisdom about the debt and what have you. Even though think about the context. I mean, look at what's happening in Europe. How's that working out for them?
Right.
Let's do what they're doing, okay? Great idea. Anyway, I think the Democrats are they may be willing to do some bargaining in a way that is not good for America, and once again, it may be that the Tea Party or the right wing of the Republican Party saves us. I mean, I hate to think this way. It's not good. There are many things. There are many things on the agenda that need to be dealt with. We have problems, big ones, and we can't even go near them. All we're doing at this point is trying to stop the bleeding, and these people are trying to bleed the patient. So, that's the best we can do, is fight them off, fight off the leeches, and try to keep them from making things worse. That's a terrible position to be in.
Yes.
But in a weird way, the crazy people with the leeches, they're mad because they're not putting enough leeches on, so they won't let them put any. I'm sorry, I'm extending
the idea being
beyond.
is that the Democrats, if the Republicans showed up with a couple leeches, the Democrats could probably sign on to that. But a buckets and dump truck full of leeches, then the Democrats are too embarrassed at that point to say, "Wait a second, you've got a dump truck full of leeches," and so. That's that. Let's leave on that note.
Right.
And
Could we just open one vein instead of all the leeches, because that's even too gross for us.
Pray that the Republicans show up with just more leeches than the mind can conceive of, and maybe we'll be safe.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's all this is sort of converged. I mean, some of it by design and some of it just by accident. I don't think all this, all these things on the fiscal cliff. I mean, before we end this, just let me point out one more thing. There are two other things happening in the lame duck session. There's the end of the payroll tax cut and extended unemployment benefits.
Mm-hmm.
If it goes by the same scenario that it did last time, we're going to see a buildup of, we've got to help the unemployed people. This is terrible, which we do. I mean, I'm not, saying that, but they'll use that. That'll be the hostage. Right. And I don't know. They could throw in something else. I mean, I don't know what it would be. I'm thinking maybe some, immigration deal or something like that, where they hold it over the heads of the liberals and say, how could you do this to these poor people? We need to do all these other things. So, keep an eye on that. Those are the two things.
That's the bait for those people on the left. I mean, the interesting it's an interesting dilemma, because obviously we have extended unemployment in this country now. Nobody seems to, none of our elites seem to want to address that issue, and they will throw this bone out there. The same with frankly, putting aside the meager stimulative effects of tax cuts, I would just assume allow that moratorium on the Social Security taxes to essentially expire, and then deal with the problem that we need to fix the economy come the 2013, the spring. I mean, the only thing that I think would create less urgency on behalf of the Democrats to extend that moratorium is that they're now, at the very least, House is 2.5 years away from the next election,
right.
And the Senate, and the president will not have another election, and so maybe they will really make a genuine attempt to stimulate the economy in a sort of less clandestine way, rather than these sort of not even eighth measures that they take that ultimately end up being bigger excuses to cut our social insurance programs.
Yeah. Well, from your lips. I mean, that's the best case scenario there, that, somehow or another this whole thing shakes out. I mean, this, I'm always kind of, I'm writing pray for gridlock, but it's only because, I just think we have to stop what both parties are trying to do, and gridlock is the only way we can do it. But, in reality, there are things that we could do to help this economy, and it would be really, really great if we could do that. And, it's possible that somehow this whole thing, the fever could break. Maybe the expiration of the Bush tax cuts and the idea of the replacement of the Obama tax cuts, that seems like a pretty shocking thing to me, shocking to the entire system of the political establishment, to have them come in and put on the table middle-class tax cuts. And, and I should say, there's a lot of people out there who think that we should let both of those tax cuts expire.
I'm one of them. But,
and I don't, and on a theoretical basis, I don't have a problem with that. But I think that the economy is dicey enough that having middle-class tax hikes at this point is probably not the greatest idea. I just feel like, and I'm not saying that just on a political level. I think even on an economic level, we might
extend them for another 2 years,
there.
Let's say.
Yeah, do something like that and keep fighting over middle-class tax cuts, you know what I mean, instead of, that's always a good, when the time comes, I think, we'll be able to deal with that a little bit more efficiently. And I could be wrong about that, but I just feel like that's better terrain for the Democrats. But maybe that will break the fever. I don't know. I mean, you've got this entire group of elites, both government and financial and business elites, who are seemingly determined to do this thing. And
they
all
smell
you have to do is
they
look
smell
at Europe.
the opportunity, and this could be one of their best opportunities. And I think that's why they're so determined. They see this lame duck session as a field of gold for them. And I'm not going to carry out the metaphor, but it will. They want to shower us with gold, as it were.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, all right, Digby. Maybe next time we got to pre-tape these things, because every time we talk, I want to go have a drink, and it's just
yeah, absolutely.
At
Let's
least
do
it's
that
past noon on the East Coast. You're going to have to wait a couple hours.
Drink. Yeah, we'll drink while we're doing it. That might actually help.
Yes. Digby from the blog Hullabaloo at digbysblog.blogspot.com. Always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sam.